So I talked to Craig, said, come do a TED Talk for my students. And I thought, why? I'm a professor. I get paid to talk for 50 minutes. How the hell am I going to only talk for 15 or 18? So I thought, I'll give it a go. I said, what should I do? He said, well, talk about Shakespeare. And I thought, why Shakespeare? Right? Why Shakespeare? The only answer I could come up with was to plagiarize our gorgeous young prime minister and say, well, it's 2016. Right? That's a start. Right? And it's the easiest one, right? Because 400 years and 6 days ago, on April 23rd, Shakespeare died. Prince died this week. He's had a lot of press. Will he still have that press 400 years from now? I don't know. Will there be a press 400 years from now? Probably not. So why? Why after 400 years? In 2012, during the London Olympics, lots of exciting things happened. One of them we probably all remember is the Lightning Man, right? Usain Bolt repeated it again, right? Won all those sprint events. Hundreds of thousands of people witnessed something else. Every Olympics matches sport with culture, and there's always a cultural Olympiad. In 2012 in London, they chose Shakespeare. There were over 100 productions between April the 23rd and the end of the event in November. 70 of those took place in the Globe Theatre. They represented countries, over 40 countries from around the world, and they were in 37 different languages. Why? Most of those countries had been colonized by the English. Having thrown off all the shackles of colonization, why had they kept Shakespeare? And why did they want to listen to Shakespeare in their own language? And why, when they came to London, did thousands of people living in London whose origins were in those countries come to listen to Shakespeare in the language into which they had been born? That's what I want to talk to you about today. Right? The power of listening to Shakespeare. That's why I don't want a text up there, because that would contradict me. Right? And that's why I'm glad we closed that book. Right? When Shakespeare was first performed, and for well over 200 years, when people wrote about going to plays, when they wrote about going to a Shakespeare play or any play, they would write in their diary, they would write in their commonplace book, last night I went and I heard Midsummer Night's Dream. Last night I went and I heard Hamlet. No one ever wrote until well into the 19th century that they saw a play, because a play is about voice. And no one understood that more than Shakespeare did. Right? We are there because it consoles us to hear a human voice. Because we want a voice to make the sounds of joy and sorrow for us. Because what matters in life is what we apprehend, what we seize, what seizes us. Those things that make us terrified, and those things that make us joyful. And theater brings us those, and Shakespeare no more so. So it's curious, not tragic, just curious, that when students come to me in university, majority of them say, oh, Shakespeare, I don't know. So I was so hard in high school. Some of them will say, oh, I loved it. Right? I would say, what did you love about it? Oh, the movies. There's such great Shakespeare movies. And I have to say, well, no. Shakespeare is not about watching a movie. Right? There has to be a person there. A person who is enduring the story for us, so that in witnessing it, we can be grasped and grasp in turn the emotions that are being experienced. Don't be afraid of Shakespeare. Right? Most of my students, many of you, one of the reasons I thought, well, we'll do this, right? Because, Craig said there'll be over 900 students here, and they're all going to be doing Shakespeare at some point or other, holding their noses or not, right? And I said, well, what do they do? Well, the usual things. Midsummer Night's Dream, Hamlet, Romeo and Juliet, Macbeth. I thought, oh, great. Well, we'll get there, we'll see, we'll talk about some of those, right? But most of them probably also use the No Fear Shakespeare cribs, right? That translate Shakespeare into English, as if it wasn't English to begin with, right? And the Sparks Notes people have made millions of dollars off the backs of No Fear Shakespeare, right? But, when we shouldn't have feared him to begin with. Huh? And Shakespeare never made a penny in his life off of the printing of his plays. He could not have cared less. When the folio came out, 7 years after his death, it came out because the surviving partners of his company wanted to make a memorial. He never cared. There were hundreds of editions of his works. He never made a penny on them because it wasn't about reading. And that's what I want to focus on now. I want to take a couple of scenes, and I want to talk you through them. And I want to try to give you a sense of what you can apprehend when you look and listen, right? And what I'm going to say to you now, and perhaps repeat and concluding, because I have no idea where I'm going. Right? It'll depend on what we hear when we listen to these texts. Right? Don't look for meaning. There isn't any. Don't look for a thesis. Don't hunt themes. Don't analyze metaphors. Don't worry about what you're going to write your essay about. Right? Just listen. And open yourself up as you listen. And be very responsive to what you feel. Because apprehension is far more important than comprehension. And in Midsummer Night's Dream, one of Shakespeare's extraordinary figures, the Duke Theseus, says precisely that at the end of the play. And he says, one of the interesting things about life is this. He said, whenever we apprehend an effect, we want to comprehend a cause. And that's a problem, especially with theater and always with life. Something happens to us and we want to know why, right? Well, the cause doesn't matter. Who knows what the first cause of anything is? Was it God the Creator or the Big Bang? They're beyond my comprehension, right? But in the moment of life, I apprehend constantly what it is to be living. And to seek meaning in that, rather than to simply swim in the luxuriousness of my own soul and heart, seems like an extraordinary abandonment of the joy of living. So let's look at Shakespeare. We'll go through maybe just one scene. The screen here tells me I've got 9.5 minutes. I want to see what we can do. That should give us enough for one. I'm going to give you a choice. I've got a few things on my mind. Let's go for two that are big ones out there. If you haven't encountered them yet, you're going to encounter them in your high school years. Romeo and Juliet, Hamlet. Which one do you want? I think Romeo and Juliet. Right, wrong. Craig? What did it? Romeo? Okay. And what? Okay, now, if I can stay, oh boy, I'm under 9 minutes now. So if I can talk like the Boltman, right? If we can get through this scene, maybe we do a bit of Hamlet. Maybe we finish with a moment from Hamlet. Okay, here we go. What I'm going to do with Romeo and Juliet? I'm going to go to the scene where we first meet Juliet, because it tells us something about Shakespeare. You know what Shakespeare's really good at? He's great at women. He's great at listening to women and making us listen to women. And there's a reason for that, because in his lifetime, no woman was ever on the stage. No woman ever acted on the English stage until 1665. So men always played the parts of women. And not just boys. There were men in the company who spent their entire career aging through female parts. Right? So in this scene, we first meet Juliet. Right? We have Juliet, and we have the nurse, and we have Lady Capulet. Three principal women from the play. Right? We've not met Juliet yet. It's Act 1, Scene 3. But the nurse is sitting. Lady Capulet we've met. And she comes in and says, "Where's my daughter?" We met Lady Capulet in Act 1, Scene 1, when the men were all fighting. causing all that difficulty. The Montagues and the Capulets wrestling with one another, men drawing their swords, all demonstrating their masculinity. Excruciatingly funny. And Lady Capulet knows that. And she mocks her husband. She says to him, "Why bother getting your sword out, old man? There's no point." What? She's a strong woman. Huh? So she comes in and she says, "Where's my daughter?" And the nurse says, "Oh, by my maidenhead, these last 12 years," she says, I called her and she didn't come. She said, "I swear by my virginity at 12. I've been calling her, I don't know where she is." And then she gets up and she says, "Juliet, no, I don't want that, really. I don't want anything up there. Can we just kill that? Is it impossible? How do I kill those screens?" Great. And she starts calling her, "Lady Bird, my dear one, where are you?" In most productions, Juliet's on the balcony, or she's not on stage. Because the text says, "Enter Juliet." Because always in the original printings, they say enter when the character speaks. She's already there. Everything the nurse is saying, if you listen, right, is what you do when you're playing with a small child. Right? You must have all have done that. Or an aunt or an uncle or parent has done that with you, right? Joey, where are you, Joey? My goodness, Joey, when are you going to come? What am I going to do with you, Joey? And where's Joey the whole time, right? Right there, right? Right behind you, and you pretend you don't see him, right? That's where Juliet is, if we really are listening to what the nurse is doing there. "Lady Bird, my dear one, where are you?" Right? And Lady Capulet is standing watching, right? And eventually Juliet says, "Here I am. Who wants me?" Playing with the nurse, right? And the nurse says, "Your mother." And Juliet, the Lady Capulet says to the nurse, "Will you give us a minute? There's something I need to tell my daughter." And the nurse begins to leave. And Lady Capulet says, "No, come back. Please, come back." And what she needs to tell Juliet is your father has decided that you're going to be married now. And you're going to meet tonight the man you're going to marry. Now, what's crucial in this scene, if we are listening and looking, is what Lady Capulet's doing, right? Because always in Shakespeare, in crucial scenes, when he wants us to listen, there's a listener on stage. And here it's Lady Capulet, right? Listening while her daughter plays with the nurse. And then the nurse tells a long story, a comic story about Juliet growing up. And Juliet's mother listens, knowing that she's about to tell her daughter childhood is over. What's she feeling while she's listening? What does any parent feel at that moment, comically in TV ads, where you give your child the keys to the car for the first time? When you leave them at their university residence? When their probation offer comes and takes them away? Whatever the point, where you realize, what happened to my child? How did I miss that? If we're listening, that's what's happening in that scene. Most productions miss that because people are reading and they ignore Lady Capulet. An extraordinary thing happens when the nurse is talking. Right? They're trying to figure out how old Juliet is. And her mother says, "Oh, I don't think she's 14 yet." And the nurse says, "Oh, no, it'll be 2 weeks. I remember because my Suzanne, my daughter and her were born at the same time. My Suzanne, who God took from me because she was too good for me." Right? The nurse's daughter died in her infancy, and Juliet lived. The nurse says that looking at Juliet, and Lady Capulet is looking at Juliet. And 2 daughters are dead. And if we're not listening, we miss that. The nurse tells us, my Susan died almost 14 years ago. And Lady Capulet is thinking, my child will be lost to me in 2 weeks when she marries Paris and when she goes to live with him. And when the child I remember playing just disappears, he's gone. That's the crucial thing about listening, right? I've got 2 minutes. I'm going to very quickly tell you something about Hamlet and then tie this up, right? At the end of Hamlet, when all the swordplay is going on and the poisoning and a dozen people are going to be dead on stage and it's going to be full of spectacle and it turns into a real guy flick, right? There's a chick moment in there that's powerful, and it's about mothers. Gertrude says nothing but 3 lines. The first of them is, Hamlet, let me wipe your brow, right? Take my napkin, she says, and wipe your brow. You look so tired, right? At the beginning of the play, she had wanted to touch him, and he wouldn't let her touch him. He never lets her touch him in the play. He pulls away because he's angry at her for marrying his uncle, right? Shakespeare gives her as her second last line, let me wipe thy brow. And she takes her handkerchief and wipes the sweat off her son's brow. Just the way your mother, even when you're 62, like me, on a cold day, will tighten up your jacket. Or call you at university and say, is it snowing? Wear your mittens, right? When we don't listen in life, we miss the small things. In literature, listening is crucial to getting those things too. That's why Shakespeare matters. Not because we should read him, but because we should be listening to him. At the beginning of Hamlet, there's a man who's all alone on stage, Francisco, waiting to be relieved by Bernardo. He can be out there alone as long as the director wants to leave him there, saying nothing. Bernardo comes, and Bernardo says, who's there? Because it's dark. And Francisco says, nay, tell me, unfold yourself, he says. Open yourself up to me. And I say to you, unfold yourself when you read Shakespeare. Close the book. Open yourself up. Apprehend. And you won't worry about the meaning. Unfold, listen, and allow life and literature to touch you. Thank you.